Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Olivine Raiders looking to return to their regulation season dominance that they displayed in Season A2, going up against the Laverre Constrictors, who are trying to get themselves back into a top 5 spot. But as we have a look at this tale of the tape, the Raiders, who are currently sitting in second place, have dropped one game across their 2 series, with each series consisting of 3 games, and they want to keep it that way, but the Constrictors sitting 1 spot out of the top 5. But with all of that said, let us know in the comments below who you think's going to win in this matchup. Will it be the metal decks? Will it be the psychic decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And going first, it is the Super Burst Impact deck of the Olivine Raiders, moving the Magina, who we've yet to see come into action this season, in the active spot, going up against the Swirlix in the active spot for the Thrifty Treats deck of the Laverre Constrictors. But it is the Ferroseed being pulled by the Raiders, and they've got that Professor's Research, that all-important supporter card that they are going to play immediately. They get the Guzma, they get the Ferrothorn as well, so they surely, and they do, play that Ferroseed, who they will be able to evolve on their next turn. But they also get the Poison Barb onto the Magina. They want to make the Constrictors hesitant to go on the offensive, because that Sweets Relay can build up and become extremely powerful for this Thrifty Treats deck, as it is the Guzma being pulled for the Constrictors. But they're going to play their Professor's Research instead of the Guzma. They get the leftovers, they get the Mimikyu as well, and they are going to get that basic Pokemon onto the bench, because they do not want an empty bench. If that happens and they lose their active Pokemon, they would immediately lose the game. But they're still going to go with the Sweets Relay from the Swirlix, 10 damage onto the Magina here, but Swirlix is going to be taking that poison damage thanks to that Poison Barb. It does come back over to the Raiders, and they do get their Alolan Diglett. They've also got the big Malasada and the X-Speed in hand. The Diglett's online, the Ferrothorn also coming online as well for the Raiders. Now looking at that Silver Cannon of Magina, it does require 2 energy, and if the opposing Pokemon has an ability, it does an additional 40 damage than the 40 it already does. Now Swirlix and its evolved form Slowpuff do not have an ability, as the second Mimikyu is pulled for the Constrictors. It is the Try to Imitate Mimikyu that is moved onto the bench, and the Slowpuff, they had both in hand, that does come online for the Constrictors, and now Slowpuff has been cured of that poisoning, and now they're going to play that Guzma, and surely that is why they were happy to let that Swirlix take that poison status condition at first, as they've got their own Poison Barb plus the leftovers in hand. But the Sweets Relay, 30 damage, but it does additional damage for every consecutive Sweets Relay that we see. They also get the, and with that said, it does 60 damage, an extra 60 if the Sweets Relay was in the previous turn. So we've just seen Magina taken off the board by the Constrictors, already doing 90 damage with Slurpuff here, who is restoring 10 health thanks to the leftovers, and the Raiders are on the back foot already, needing to think about how they want to approach this. The Ferrothorn needs 3 energy, the Diglett moved into the active spot, there's the leftovers coming into play for Slurpuff. Diglett only requires 1 energy to go on the offensive, as they pull their second Diglett as well, but Ferrothorn does have those Steel Spikes ability that allows them to do damage back to the opposing Pokemon when they take damage. And with their own Guzma being played, the Constrictors have to discard their leftovers here. They pull the Comfey, they've still got the Poison Barb in hand, as they're looking at that Mimikyu, where if they get the 2 energy onto it, they try to imitate, they flip a coin, and if they get a heads, they can do an attack that the opposing Pokemon has, as the Comfey comes online, preventing any of their Pokemon that have Psychic Energy on them from taking status conditions. As the Sweets Relay continues and the Diglett is wiped off the board, the Constrictors and this Thrifty Treats deck have already taken 2 points in Game 1 in our 3-game series, where all 3 games count because you get 2 points for each win across the 3 games. The Ferrothorn into the active spot, the Magina being pulled for the Raiders. Now having a look at their Pokemon here, they are going to move the Magina onto the bench. They could do the same with the Diglett, and that is exactly what they're going to do, but they have not taken a point yet here in Game 1. It comes back over to the Constrictors. They pull their second Comfey as well. Now having a look at the Shadow Hit Mimikyu, who does do 20 damage to their own teammate when it goes on the offensive, but here it is, the Sweets Relay, another 90 damage, as they were about to have a look at their other Slurpuff for some strange reason, but here it is, they're just double checking. And we can see as well, they do take the weakness of Ferrothorn, Slowpuff just taking that recoil damage, but with the weakness, this allows Ferrothorn to do an additional 20 damage to the Slowpuff. It does get the leftovers, but that also means that 70 damage will become 90. They play the big Malasada. They're trying to restore as much health for the Ferrothorn as possible. And with this spinning attack, they have finally taken Slowpuff off the board, getting their first point as Slowpuff is moved into the discard pile. And it is going to be Ferrothorn with only 30 health remaining, as it does have to contend with that poisoning. The Mimikyu, the try to imitate Mimikyu being moved into the active spot, also having to contend with the weakness of the metal decks here. The Constrictors pulling their second Swirlix. They've got the second Slowpuff already in hand as well, so they immediately get the Slowpuff. The Swirlix onto the bench, and with this try to imitate, they need to flip the heads. Moment of truth, and they get the tails. The Raiders can breathe a sigh of relief. This buys them a little bit of time here, as it is the second Ferrothorn being pulled for the Raiders. They do get a first energy onto that second Magina as the spinning attack continues, and Mimikyu now being wiped off the board. 90 damage. The Raiders are trying to bring it back here in game 1. They do not want to drop a single one to the Constrictors, who do need to determine who they want to move into the active spot. They go with the compact. That spinning attack does do 30 damage, and it is Ferrothorn chowing down on the leftovers to bring its health back up to 30, but the poisoning brings it back down to 20. The Constrictors pull the Acer Roller. They just need to get one energy onto the compact. It can go with this own spinning attack. 30 damage to take Ferrothorn off the board, and the Constrictors and this Thrifty Treats deck are able to hold on. The Raiders could not bring it back in time, and the Constrictors will take game 1 as we have our first table reset. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like and subscribe to help the PokeType League TCG grow for many seasons to come, and you won't miss out on any of the action. And it is the Constrictors going first with their Forbidden Light deck in this game 2. They've got the Lunatone, they've also got the Mauler with the Shinotic already in hand. They put the Lunatone in the active spot, the Mauler on the bench. The Raiders playing with their Laser Focus deck. We can see the Aron, the Morwal, and the Togedemaru, which is an incredibly fun name to say. They've also got the Sophocles, who pairs fantastically with the Togedemaru, and the Laron, who I hope I'm actually saying correctly. On to the bench is the Aron with the Laron in hand. But here we go, game 2. The Raiders do not want to drop their first series of this season. They've just dropped only their second game, as it is that Dawn Wings Necrozma being pulled for the Constrictors, immediately going on to the bench. It is the Poison Barb pulled for the Raiders. They get a first energy onto the Togedemaru, and they get the Poison Barb onto it as well. Now with those Bristling Spikes, they do 30 damage, but it also causes the Pokemon that attacks Togedemaru in the next turn to do 30 damage to itself. Or more so, take 30 recoil damage, but it is the second Mauler being pulled for the Constrictors. The Illuminate from the Shinotic allows them to get a Pokemon card from their deck, being the Oricura, as they are pulled at random. And the Oricura is also contemplated to be moved onto the bench, but they seem to decide against it. Lunatone does require 2 energy to go on the offensive with this Moon Press that does 50 damage. They get the Poison Barb onto it, and speaking of Poison Barbs, with the Guzma, the Poison Barb on the Togedemaru has been discarded. Raiders now pulling their Professor's Research. This will allow them to get 2 additional cards out of their deck, but they can only play 1 supporter card per turn, and they do have the Sophocles, which is also a supporter card. It looks like that's the way they are leaning, so they are going to do 60 damage with the Togedemaru, because Sophocles pairing perfectly with the Togedemaru allows it to do an additional 30 damage, which will definitely make the Constrictors reluctant to go on the offensive, because the Lunatone will take 30 damage back from Togedemaru if it goes on the offensive. The second Necrozma has been pulled for the Constrictors. They use another Illuminate from the Shinotic here to get their second Lunatone in hand as well. But now it is the Oricura taking that final bench slot for the Constrictors and this Forbidden Light deck, as it is going to be the Moon Press. 50 damage onto the Togedemaru, dealing with that poison condition as well. But the recoil onto the Lunatone discards it from the table, and the Raiders take the first point here in game 2. The Constrictors need to think about who they want to move into the active spot. They've got the Oricura, they've got the Shinotic, and the Lunala. Now the Shinotic is weak to the metal types, as opposed to the Oricura and Necrozma, who I just called a Lunala, as well being weak to the darkness types. The Professor's Research allows the second Togedemaru and the Klefki to be pulled for the Olivine Raiders. It is The Togedemaru though being moved on to the bench. And the Raiders still thinking about how they want to approach this. If they go on the offensive with the Togedemaru, that poisoning will take it off the board. But instead they're going to retreat it. They don't want to drop any points here in game 2. They're not willing to risk losing this series within the first 2 games. They move the second Togedemaru full health into the active spot. The second Orikoru being pulled for the Constrictors. Another Illuminate from the Shiinotic allows them to get their second Shiinotic in hand. Constrictors thinking about how they want to approach this. None of their Pokemon currently have any energy, with Oricorio and Shiinotic requiring to Necrozma, who I almost called Lunala, once again does require 3 energy, so it has just received its first of 3 required energy, so it can go for that Psycho ability that does do 100 damage, but it also does 30 damage to itself, as the Aggron has been pulled and is now online for the Laser Focus deck. It is the Bristling Spikes once again from these Togedemarus though, doing this 30 damage to the opposing side, again making them reluctant and hesitant to go on the offensive. It is a huge risk as the leftovers have been pulled for the Constrictors. Another Illuminate. I think they've pulled all the Pokemon cards from their deck, and that is exactly what they've already done, so they can't capitalize on that Illuminate anymore. A second energy onto the Necrozma though, and there's not much else they can do this turn, so the Constrictors send it back over to the Raiders, who pull their second Aggron. And they do start setting up the Aggron here, who does require 4 energy for the Giga Impact, and it cannot use it in consecutive turns, and it's its only attack unfortunately for it, as the Togedemaru brings the Orikoru down to only 10 health. The big Malasada has been pulled for the Constrictors, and the Constrictors need to think about how they want to approach this coming turn. And they are going to move the second Necrozma onto the bench, getting its first energy, knowing that the other Necrozma only requires 1 more, but they can't retreat that active Orikorio, so they're buying themselves a bit of time. The second Aggron being pulled for the Raiders here, as the active, or the benched Aggron, gets its second of 4 energy. The Bristling Spikes from the Togedemaru and Orikorio is wiped off the board. The Raiders are 1 point away from taking game 2. The Constrictors, they move their Necrozma with 2 energy on it into the active spot. They've got the Beast Wall, but the Beast Wall is only useful if the opposing side has not taken any points, but the Psycho ability is extremely useful because Togedemaru has been discarded. However, there is 30 recoil damage onto the Necrozma, plus 30 damage from the Togedemaru thanks to those Bristling Spikes. Raiders need to decide if they want to move the Aggron into the active spot or the Togedemaru, who only has 10 health remaining. They're running out of time, so they go with the Togedemaru into the active spot. Those Bristling Spikes, it still needs 1 more energy, but they've pulled the Sophocles, who partners perfectly into it, allowing it to do an additional 30 damage, and this Togedemaru that started off this game is going to do 60 damage and finish off game 2, allowing the Laser Focus deck of the Raiders to take the win as they are looking to bring this series back in game 3. But it will be our final table reset as we go into game 3, and with the coin flip, it is going to be the Olivine Raiders going first, as they did flip heads, and it is going to be their Ultra Wormhole deck. We can see the Meltan being moved into the active spot. They've already got the Melmetal in hand. The Constrictors using their Ruins of Life, moving the Phantom into the active spot, and they've got their Necrozma, not to be confused with their Duskmane or Dawn Wings Necrozma. The Dawn Wings being a member of the Forbidden Light deck we previously saw, but the Duskmane Necrozma is a member of this Ultra Wormhole deck, as we see it being pulled thanks to that Pokeball being played by the Raiders, and immediately it is moved onto the bench. And the Constrictors are going to pull their Tapu Lele, who they can move on into the bench. It does do 20 damage for each energy attached to one of the opposing Pokemon, but they're also going to play their own Pokeball now. They get their second Phantom. They've got their Professor's Research they can play to get an additional 2 cards from their deck as well. They get the Banette and they get the Orikorio. These 2 Pokemon only require 1 energy each. However, the Banette cannot come online because it does evolve from the Shuppet. It is the Tapu Lele and the Orikorio being moved onto the bench as the Phantom gets its first of 2 required energy. Lusamine being pulled for the Raiders allows them to get 2 energy from their discard pile, which currently has 0 in it, and they get to move it to one of their Ultra Beast Pokemon, which is the Necrozma. They've also got the Stack Attackers inside this deck as well. And the Meltan getting its first energy. They choose not to evolve it, just going on the offensive with this Headbutt, 20 damage onto the Phantom. It comes over to the Constrictors, getting their second Spiteful Dancing Orikorio, and with that Spiteful Dance, it does 20 damage unless their active Pokemon was discarded on the previous turn from damage from the opposing side, then it does an additional 60. That Pokemon can generate 80 damage from that move. The Spooky Shot though, 30 damage onto the Meltan, having halved its health. The Leftovers getting 10 health back onto the Phantom as well. And the thing with the Oricorio and the Tapu Lele and the Banette, they all require only 1 energy to go on the offensive. It is not very energy hungry as the Leftovers being put onto the Meltan, trying to keep it out of discard range from the Phantom. But they are also going to play the Melmetal, so they won't be able to go on the offensive. That Mega Punch, 90 damage, does require 3 energy, and they've just had the second placed onto it as well. They've got that second Necrozma in hand. That Black Metal does do 100 damage, but it also has to discard an energy when it does go on the offensive. And the Raiders thinking about how they want to approach this. They could play the Repel. They're thinking about here, this is going to cause that Phantom to have to go back to the bench, and a different basic Pokemon will have to come into the active spot as the Constrictors need to decide, do they want the Tapu Lele or do they want the Oricorio? They're going with the Tapu Lele, who does have to contend with that weakness to the Mega Punch. Again, it only requires 1 energy though, and it does do damage to the opposing side based on how many energy are on that Pokemon. But it's the Shuppet being pulled for the Constrictors. They immediately get that online, and we've seen the Banette and the trouble it can cause because the active Pokemon against it cannot have an energy placed onto it if it took it damage from the Banette on the previous turn. But the energy arrow has been set up for the Tapu Lele, but instead they're going to retreat the Tapu Lele. Very clever. The Constrictors do not want to drop a point here to the Melmetal, knowing the worth of the Tapu Lele, being able to capitalize on the opposing Pokemon's energy that are on it. That Spooky Shot though, as Phantom is brought up to 70 health, the Stack Attacker has been pulled for the Raiders. But it is the Melmetal being able to get online with the Mega Punch, wiping this Phantom off the board into the discard pile, and the Raiders taking the first point here in Game 3 as they're looking to take this series. The Constrictors need to think about how they approach this. They're going with the Oricorio. The Banette would not be able to capitalize against the Melmetal. It's already got 3 energy on it. It doesn't need any more energy put onto it, but the Guzma has been pulled for the Constrictors, and I'm sure they wish they had this earlier because that Leftovers has kept Melmetal out of discard range from the Constrictors here. But the Oricorio does get its first energy, and the second Oricorio is moved onto the bench. This Spiteful Dance, 80 damage onto the Melmetal. But they're also going to play the Guzman now. They don't wait to see if there's another time to play it. The Spiteful Dance, 80 damage, and Melmetal has been wiped off. Sorry, no it has not. I don't know what I'm saying there. Melmetal has been brought down to only 20 health remaining. It was a late night last night, okay? As the Olivine Raiders start to generate energy for the Necrozma, it gets its first of 3 required energy. The Melmetal, continuing with these Mega Punches though, takes the second point for the Raiders because the Oricorio has been wiped off the table. The Raiders are 1 point away from taking Game 3. The Constrictors still need 3 points in this game. It is the Trevenant being pulled for the Constrictors as the Banette has been moved into the active spot, getting its only required energy with the Nightbind, 30 damage to wipe the Melmetal off the board. And the Raiders now are going to move their Necrozma into the active spot. As we said, they can't have that energy attached to it in this turn, but the Lusamine allows them to do exactly that. It bypasses the restriction from the Banette. They're playing their second Necrozma just in case they don't want to make any errors. They do get an energy onto it, but this Black Metal wipes the Banette off the board. The Raiders had exactly the cards they needed in hand. The Constrictors did everything right, but that Lusamine changed everything that the Ruins of Life deck had in mind as the Raiders stay in second place, having dropped down there this round. But next round, they will be going up against the Cinnabar Blazers, whereas for the Constrictors next round, they will be going up against the Kitakami Rogues, as those two are balancing the cut line between each other. But with that said, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.